This is the IOA Podcast, a space for truth, tenderness, and becoming whole, one breath at a time. Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Malaika, and I am super excited to welcome you to episode 18 of the podcast. We have been going very strong since the fall of 2025, and we are really getting into some important things. So first order of business before we get started into talking about the episode topic, we want to do some housekeeping things. So remember, we need for you to like and subscribe to the podcast. So make sure that you are clicking on the like button. If you have not already subscribed to the channel, please make sure that you subscribe and look at the places where you can find us. Remember, you can find us here on YouTube. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere where your podcast can be found. So I wanted to start with that because it's important, because by you doing that, that allows people to know that we are here, and that allows people to understand the work that we are doing together. So that's really important. Wanted to start with that. We are going to be stepping into talking about something very powerful called diaspora healing. So if you've ever felt like you're carrying two homes, or sometimes you don't feel like you land in any home, if you've ever felt like there's a longing that you can't fully explain, or if you've ever felt a pride and a grief at the same time living in the body, then this episode is definitely going to speak to you. I want you to understand what diaspora healing is. It's what happens when we stop treating disconnection as if it's a personal flaw, and we start naming it as the historical condition that it is. It is what happens when we remember that homesickness can live in our nervous system. It's what happens when we realize that our ancestors did not just travel, many of them were taken. And that's one of the fallacies that we hear from some people currently. They try to make it seem as if our ancestors immigrated here. That's not what happened. For those of us who are Black Americans, who are indigenous to this soil, our ancestors were taken. Many of them fled. Many of them were forced to remake home with whatever they could carry in their breath, their prayers, the music that they had, the food, and the languages. So today we're going to talk about what diaspora healing does to identity, what it does to belonging, what it does to the body and to our relationships. We're also going to talk about how we begin to remember home without romanticizing the pain, but how we can root ourselves even when we can't get those perfect answers. So, quick note before we begin, just remember that this podcast is always about reflection and education. It is not a substitute for therapy or medical care. As a clinician, I cannot, in good conscience, not say that. So, if anything in this episode brings up a deep pain, please take care of yourself. Pause the episode. Reach out for support. All right, so let's take a quick opening breath together. Do an inhale slowly through the nose. Hold it for a beat. And then exhale slowly through your mouth. All right, we have settled ourselves down, and I want to welcome you to the work. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to dig deeper into this. We'll be back in just a second. Welcome back, everyone. We are going to dig deeper into this episode. And so I wanted to open us up with talking about what diaspora healing really means. Oftentimes when people hear the word diaspora, they're usually thinking about geography. They're thinking about the different countries, continents. They think about a scattering. But diaspora is also psychological. So diaspora means that we're living with a split sense of self. And it can mean adapting to surviving and then wondering why you still feel unsteady, even when it's calm in your life currently. It can mean carrying multiple cultural codes and still being told that you're not enough from any of them. The diaspora can show up in different ways. It can be feeling like you have to perform to belong. It can show up feeling like you always have to translate yourself to others. It could be feeling guilt for not feeling connected enough. It can be feeling shame for being too connected. And I understand what that feels like. And feeling grief that you cannot name because no one taught you that you should be calling it grief. Diaspora healing is the process of reclaiming wholeness across that split. So it's not only about returning to a homeland. For many of us, returning is complicated. We have to look about the fact that it could possibly be unsafe depending on where your homeland is. It could not be financially accessible for you. Everyone's not in the position financially to be able to go back to their homeland. Sometimes the place that we imagine no longer exists in the way that we hold it in our mind. So diaspora healing is not just going back. It is coming back to yourself. It is asking, how do I live in my body as home? How do I build belonging that is not based on approval? How do I honor what was lost without being swallowed by it? And how do I carry my culture with dignity, not as a costume or a performance? That is the work that we're going to do today in this episode. And hopefully this will be something that will speak to you in a way that is valuable and can lead you forward. So we're going to take another break, and we will be back after this break to get a little bit deeper into the episode. Be back in just a second. Welcome back, everyone, to the episode. And so we are going to get into talking about the invisible grief of diaspora. And so we want to name something that is often minimized, the fact that the diaspora includes grief. It is grief for land, it's grief for our languages, it's grief for the elders that we never got to know. It is grief for traditions that got interrupted or things that we don't even know when it comes to traditions. It is grief for the names that got changed. It's grief for the stories that were buried, and the grief for safety, because even when we survive, we often survive by becoming smaller or minimizing ourselves. And when grief goes unnamed, it doesn't disappear. What happens is it just relocates. So it can relocate into your body, and the way that it manifests itself is as chronic tension. It can relocate into your mind, and it can show up as perfectionism. It can relocate into your relationships as a sense of hyper independence or fear of being misunderstood or the constant need to prove that you belong. A lot of us were taught that grief is only for things like death, but diaspora grief is also about absence. It is about what was taken, and it is about what was never given. Also, things were interrupted and then normalized to be accepted as this is just how it is. If you're feeling something heavy when we talk about this, let that be information that you use. Don't let it motivate you to feel as if you're a failure or that it's a weakness. This is simply information, because your longing is not random. Your sadness is not dramatic. Your anger is not too much. Often it is ancestral, it's historical, and it is your nervous system telling you the truth. And it's okay for us to be able to go through this information and to name this truth in a way that is gentle and that is uplifting, is going to build us and move us forward. And so I wanted to kind of set this baseline because I feel like it's really important for us to understand that what we are feeling, that absence, that longing, that thing that we cannot explain, is not something that we need to wish away. It's not something that we need to feel as if we need to minimize and push through. This is something that we need to sit in, understand, and identify in order for us to move forward in a way that is going to be healthy. So I want us to take another break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the episode. We will be back in just a second. Welcome back, everyone, to the episode. And we are going to get into talking about how diaspora shows up in the nervous system. And so I want us to really talk about the body for a moment and really understand what is happening for our bodies. If your lineage includes any kind of forced displacement, any kind of racial terror, colonization, migration under pressure, war, famine, political instability, or poverty that's tied to systemic violence, your nervous system may have inherited adaptation patterns. So this is not genetics, but more an adaptation because you have had to train your body to adapt to the experiences that you've had. And so just really quick mini lecture here. And I have talked about this a little bit in previous episodes. I've talked about the concept of epigenetics. And so epigenetics is what can be passed down genetically because of the experience that we've had. So the nurture has caused our nature to show up in certain ways. So it's activated certain things. Because of this diaspora patterns that I just discussed with you, the body has learned how to stay alert. And because of that, you're reading the room constantly. You're not trusting when things are easy or at rest. You don't stand out too much or make yourself, a spectacle possibly, or draw attention to yourself. You don't need too much. You minimize yourself, or it could be possible that you need more because of these deficiencies. You're not resting as deeply as you should, and you're not speaking as freely as you think is possible in situations because of the lived experiences that you've had historically. So some of these are connected to the experiences you've had. A lot of it is connected to what has happened in the past for your people. And so these patterns are beneficial to keep us alive because they're survival patterns. They really do keep us alive, but they also make it hard for us to find home anywhere, even when we are in a sense of safety. We feel safe, we know it's safe, but we cannot acknowledge and rest in that. This is why diaspora healing cannot be purely intellectual. You can't just think your way into belonging. You have to practice it in your body, which means that you have to build the capacity to feel. You have to build the capacity to feel safety, to feel ease, to feel joy, to feel stillness, and most importantly, to feel connection. Some of us are not used to ease. We're just used to functioning. We feel like if we do and we're performing, that things will be okay. Some of us are not used to belonging. We're used to having to earn our place in society, in a room, in a position, etc. Some of us are not used to rest. We are constantly used to having to stay ready because we never know when we're going to have to go. So diaspora healing is asking you these questions. It's asking you, what does my body do when things get quiet? And I really need you to sit with that because it's important to start to identify the patterns that exist inside of you. The next question is, what does my body do when someone loves me gently? What is happening for you when you are experiencing genuine love, gentle care? How do you respond to that? And this last question is, what does my body do when I do not have to explain myself? If the answer to any of these questions is you get uncomfortable, I want you to know that you're not broken. You are just patterned. That is the pattern that has existed for you for survival reasons. And the beautiful thing about patterns is that they can change. That is the reason why epigenetics is amazing, because although the lived experiences of our ancestors created the patterns that we live in now, it doesn't mean that we cannot change our behaviors and our environment and do different things in order to shift how our biology shows up. And that will be passed down to who comes after you. So typically we do the iapause separately. For this episode, I wanted to include it in the end of this particular segment. So if you want to or can, please place your hand over your heart and a hand on your belly. I want you to pay attention and focus on the contact. I want you to notice the warmth coming from your body. And I want you to inhale through your nose for 4 seconds. So inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to exhale for 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. Remember, we're inhaling through the nose and exhaling through the mouth. So we're going to do it again. Inhale for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And exhale through the mouth for 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now I want you to ask yourself quietly, what would it feel like to be at home in me today? It's not about forever. It's not about perfection. It's about just today. What would it feel like to be home in you today? And whatever comes up, I want you to let that be allowed. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to change it. Don't try to make it perfect. Allow whatever comes up to be what it is. So we're going to take another quick break. And we're going to come back and talk about something that I think we all can understand and that we all have had moments where we dealt with, and that's dealing with code switching and other things that goes with it. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back in just a second. Welcome back, everyone. And we are going to get a little bit deeper into this episode. We're going to talk about identity code switching and the cost of fitting in. But again, before we do that, I want us to remind us of the things that we need to do that are really important to make sure that more people know about the show and what we have going on. So remember to like and subscribe, to share these episodes with people that you know. If something touched you, make sure that you are getting this information out there, because again, this teaches the algorithm what's important and it lets more people understand what we have going on. So I want us to make sure that more people like you can start to build this resilience as you have, as part of being in this community. Now, let's get into talking about how we are taught by Diaspora to shapeshift. All right. So if any of you are into sci-fi, you know what I'm talking about when I say shapeshifting. It's basically becoming what you need to become depending on the experience that you're having. So you're learning through Diaspora which version of yourself is safe for you to be at work. You're learning which version of you is acceptable depending on what neighborhood you are in. You're learning which version will be labeled to be too much, and you're learning which version of you will be labeled to be not enough. And this, again, is not a personal defect. This is a part of the survival skill that you have had to develop in order for you personally and for our lineage to continue to exist. We've pushed through some really tough things. And so the only way that we have been able to survive all the things we have gone through is because of these survival skills that we have developed. But I cannot, in good conscience, not say to you how survival skills come with a cost. So the cost could be things like exhaustion, because you're always adjusting and trying to make sure that you are doing what you need to do to the point where you don't have enough energy left to give. It could be resentment, because you are always explaining or trying to feel like you have to justify who you are as a person. And if I'm being honest, as a people, as a community, I do feel like we have those two things that I just mentioned, exhaustion and resentment. We have often felt that, and we're still feeling that, especially here in America with what is going on right now. The other thing that it makes you feel is loneliness, because you never feel fully seen. It's often as if people look through you, or they don't acknowledge you, or they don't see an importance in you. And that can lead to confusion, because you start to forget what your natural voice even sounds like, what is truly you. And then there's the identity policing that happens inside our own communities, right? Have you ever heard people say you're not Black enough? Or if you happen to go visit the continent and people tell you you're too American, because you happen to know where you're a descendant of. And because you know where you're a descendant of, when you go back to the place where you descended from, they tell you you don't fit in. Or you're told you're too African because you are here in America and they want you to tone it down. They tell you you don't speak the language. One of the things that's beautiful about Black culture is the fact that we have our own language. Here in America, we have our own slang. But if you go to Nigeria, Pidgin is not necessarily a language per se, but it is its own identifying, unique way of communication. And it is just broken English, no different than African American vernacular English that we have here in the United States, right? They may even tell you that you speak the language, but your accent's not right. They'll tell you, oh, well, you didn't grow up here. Or you did grow up here, but you really don't belong here, right? Diaspora can often create gatekeeping, because people are trying to protect something that's precious to them. But in them trying to protect what's precious, it can turn into harm when it becomes a test that you have to pass in order for you to prove that you are worthy. So the reason why we want to talk about diaspora healing is because diaspora healing is basically saying, I can honor my people without shrinking my truth. I can belong without performing. I can learn without being shamed. And I can return without being punished for the distance. Here's the reframe that I want you to keep. You do not have to prove your lineage to deserve your healing. So even if you do not know what your lineage is and where you come from, you still deserve healing. You do not have to pass some type of cultural exam for you to belong. Belonging is not a prize. It is actually a human need. So instead of asking, am I enough of this? Why don't you try asking, what is true in you? What is yours to carry forward? What are you ready to relearn? And what is it that you need to release? So we're going to take another break, and then we're going to come back into talking about something that may be a little hard for people to talk about, but we're going to talk about remembering home without romanticizing what it actually was. All right. We're going to take a quick break, and then we will be back as always in just a second. Welcome back to the episode, and we are going to get into talking about remembering home without romanticizing it. And so I want us to talk about home, quote unquote, right? For some of us, home is a real place that you can actually visit. But for others, it may be an imagined place that we've stitched together from the stories that we've heard, from the photographs that we've seen, and from the longing that we have, that we know that there's something more to us or more that we belong to. For others, home could possibly be complicated because the place that our family came from may also hold trauma for us. So, diaspora healing is about not romanticizing the past. It is about integrating the truth into your day to day. So, it's possible for you to love your roots and to still acknowledge the pain. And I think that this one can oftentimes be hard to deal with because we know that we come from an amazing lineage. We know that we come from resilient people, but we still have to acknowledge all the pain that came with the roots that we are grown from. We can honor our ancestors and still name generational harm. For some of us, our ancestors are directly responsible for some of the harm that we have that has been passed down from generation to generation. And having to acknowledge that can be a little bit difficult to sit with. You can also claim culture and still critique the things in culture that have wounded you. Again, something that I know is hard to live with, but being critical and having critique of what has happened does not mean that love is not still there and that you don't still claim your culture. So remembering home is to not pretend that everything was beautiful, but you're telling the whole story and you're doing it honestly and with respect. So I've talked a lot about countries or continents or places that we could be from, but sometimes home is not just a country. Sometimes it's things like a sound, it's the drum patterns, it's the beats, it's the smell of the pot simmering, it's the way an elder would greet you. It could possibly be a prayer cadence that you remember. It could be a hairstyle, right? It could be a proverb or a song that for somehow you know, but you don't remember learning that particular song. Home is something that can be carried, and it's an important part to all of our very existence. This is one of the deepest truths about diaspora. We are carrying what could not be stolen. They tried to take so many things from us, they tried to disconnect us. But even with all of that, the seeds were planted and we carry that, and it was not something that they could take away from us. And when we reconnect to those threads, we are not just being nostalgic. What we are doing is repairing continuity because of the breach that happened in our lineage. And when there's continuity, that continuity becomes literally a medicine. So I want us to take another break. And I want to, as always, come back and give you some practical tools that will help you when it comes to diaspora healing. So I want you to sit tight. We will be back in just a second. And we are back. And so we are going into talking about practices for diaspora healing because you know I love to make things practical. So I want to offer you a set of freedom practices. And so this is the label. You know, I love giving things labels that you can start with for this week. So I want you to choose one or two. Do not try to do all of them at once. So the one thing that I often emphasize, and any other clinician or person that's teaching you how to change and grow, they will teach you that you cannot create new habits all across the board. You need to pick one thing and work on that slowly. All right. Because remember, this is not about performing. We're not performing healing. We are actually practicing it. So here's your first practice. Practice number one is one ancestral thread. Choose one thread of connection, and I want you to deepen it for 7 days. The way you could do that, it could be through a recipe, it could be through a family story, it could be a playlist of music from your lineage, it could be a language phrase that you learn and repeat daily, or it could be a spiritual practice. It could be a morning prayer, libation, scripture reading that centers your people's resilience. And as you are working on this ancestral thread, I want you to ask, what thread makes me feel more whole? So that you identify the one that you think will be very beneficial to you to begin this practice. Then for practice number 2, this is called a belonging inventory. So I want you to write down 3 spaces where you code switch heavily. Then write down 1 space where you feel more like yourself. And here's what you will need to ask. What is the difference between these 2 spaces? What do you do with your body in each of these spaces? And what do you feel in your chest, your throat, your stomach when you're in the different spaces? This is not to blame anyone or shame you. This is to gather data so that you can choose environments that support you instead of harm you. Practice number 3 is a home in the body ritual. And so this is one that I like. Once a day, do a 2-minute ritual that signals safety. So we've talked about giving your body different signals in previous episodes. It can be putting your feet on the floor and doing slow exhales. It could be your hand on your heart and naming 3 true things about yourself. It could be a gentle humming because that vibration can settle your nervous system. And it can be a warm cup of tea. Love me a good cup of tea. Sip slowly without scrolling through a device. All right. And if you're not a tea drinker, you can definitely drink your coffee. All right. Practice number 4. This is a repair the story, not the fantasy. So this is really important. Pick one family narrative for you that carries shame. For example, we do not talk about where we came from, or we do not have anything to be proud of, or we were just trying to survive. What I want you to do is to rewrite that with compassion and with truth. We did what we had to do to live. We carried wisdom even when it was hidden. We are allowed to learn what was interrupted. And then practice number 5, and this will be the last one I'll give you, is community as medicine. So you knew I was not going to let you go without bringing community into the equation. Diaspora healing's not a solo sport. So you need to find a person that you can share your story with. And remember, it's not a debate. It's not a performance. You are sharing your story and a part of who you are. So what you can ask is, what is something that your family kept even through everything? You could also ask, what is something that you want to reclaim? What is something you want to do differently? And when you witness each other, you're helping not only to repair the things that need to be repaired in you personally, but you're also repairing the isolation that has often become a part of the diaspora. Yes, it's going to be vulnerable. Yes, it's going to be hard for you to sit in and uncomfortable, but that is often where healing actually starts to begin. So we're going to take another break. And we're going to come back, and I want to give you some journaling prompts because I always like to leave you with something that can be useful for you when you're away from me. So we will be back in just a second. Welcome back. And we are going to kind of start closing out the episode. And I wanted us to start with some journal prompts. And so I talked about the fact that I don't like to really get into talking about the things that we talk about without leaving you with something that will be beneficial for you down the road. All right. So with these prompts, if you're driving while you're listening to the episode, don't worry about it for right now. You can always come back later and do the writing or do the chronicling of your answers to the prompts. So the first prompt is, where do you feel the ache of diaspora most in your life right now? And so this is important because I want us to identify the spaces that have a priority when it comes to our healing. Instead of us just trying to navigate and fix all the things, what we're going to do is look at the thing that could possibly be the biggest priority in the current moment. Prompt number 2, what part of your identity feels like it's always translating? Prompt number 3, what is one tradition, practice, or value that you want to carry forward, even if you have to learn it from scratch? And so this is going to get into identifying the ways that you have put some value on something, or there's something that you think is important for you to have from now going forward. And so you're going to learn how to do that particular thing, even if it's not something that you currently have in your practice. Number 4, what does home mean to you beyond geography? And this question, I think, is really important. We have been conditioned to believe that home is simply the geography. I am from this place, or I am from that place. And I want us to understand that home is so much bigger than just that. And then prompt number 5, if your body could speak about belonging, what would it ask for? And so I want you to just think about these for just a second. Here's the important thing to remember. Healing is not trying to become someone else. Healing is about you becoming more of who you actually are. But you're doing that with support, you're doing it with truth, and you're doing it with tenderness. Because diaspora healing is remembering home, but it also is building it if it doesn't currently exist. You're building home in your relationships, you're building home in your community, and most importantly, you're building home in your body. So we are going to close out this segment. We're going to come back and we're going to do our call to actions, and we're going to do the closing of the show. Be back in just a second. Welcome back, everyone. We are going to close out the episode, and I want to take this time really just to say thank you for spending time with me on the IOA podcast. If this episode resonated with you in any way, I want you to share it with someone who is carrying multiple worlds, someone who is trying to feel at home in themselves, or someone who needs permission to name the grief that they have been carrying quietly. And so I'm going to put up reminders again about the sharing, because again, we need to get this information out. And the only way that we can get it out is if you share it with those who don't know about this space that we have created. And so if you want to go deeper, I want to remind you that you can head over to our Substack. The Substack has weekly reflections on them. Every Wednesday, I give you expanded Aya pauses. I give you companion notes on Tuesdays for this episode. You can also leave your comments or messages with me about what home means for you. And I read them, and this information is important to me because it really does matter. So remember, the Substack community is something that you can visit. It is the iowa.substack.com. And it's really a space that's important to me because it's how I have the interaction and I know directly what it is that is resonating with you. I also want to hear from you. If you don't know, I do have a SpeakPipe account that allows me to hear your voice, allows you to leave me a voicemail message. And that is the SpeakPipe, not the SpeakPipe. Let me give it to you correctly. It's on the screen for those of you who are watching this on YouTube. It is speakpipe.com/the IOA. Speakpipe.com/the IOA. So I wanted to give that to you because that is truly important, that I want to be able to hear your actual voices on what has been resonating and touching you. And then also I want to give you this one last reminder. If you have not done so, you need to get the book that is the manual, Rooted in Resilience. This is what we use in order for us to guide ourselves through this healing journey. And you can find it on my website at malaikambrown.com. And if you are following me on Substack, you can always get that link over there that tells you where you can get the book. So before we get out of here, I just want to remind you, whether or not you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, because when you do that, the same way when you like and subscribe on YouTube, it allows more people to find the work. So until the next time when we get together, be gentle with your nervous system, be honest about your story, and please, please, please keep choosing practices that bring back you to yourself. So I will see you in the next episode. Have a great rest of your week.